Hello and welcome everyone. I want to start by thanking everybody for
joining us today. My name is Hall T. Martin, and we're here for a great SBIR seminar discussing NIH Phase II funding strategies with Earle Hager, Managing Partner at Neutrino Donut, and Dr. Anna Mesquita, Project Consultant at Baginski Wegner Company. Now for those in the audience.
We invite you to ask a question in the chat box. But for those who don't know, 10 Capital, we help startups and investors connect for funding. That's our primary mission. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we do quite a bit to form capital in the early stage marketplace. And so what we do is we help angel groups find members, we help VC funds find limited partners, and we help family offices launch. And so with that, we're forming capital for the early stage. In addition to the event we have today, we also have what's called the Family Office Roundtable. It's an online event, 2 hours each month, where we have family offices come in and listen and talk about topics relevant to the family office world. And then we have our companies pitching, and some of our VC funds are also doing presentations. The virtual quick pitch is the one you're in today. It's for tech companies. And so we do this the third Wednesday of each month, and it's a great way to find new companies to invest in. And third, we also do a life science syndicate event, a 2.5-hour event just like this one, but for the life science deals. So with that, we go to the next slide. If you want to learn more about any of these events, just log on to 10 Capital website, 10capital.group, and look at the events page, and you'll see all the events that we have going on. With that, we've also started a chat bot. We write a Startup Funding Espresso program, which is a microblog post that talks about startup funding and investing. Each one is a different topic, and we have over 2,000 of these. We have since taken them and put them inside a chat box that you can run. And so with that, let's listen to learn more about it.
Are you looking to transform your investment strategy with new cutting-edge AI? Let me introduce our newest addition to the 10 Capital team, Ava, your personal AI venture assistant.
Hi there. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ava, your personal AI venture assistant. I'm your new best friend in the world of investing in startups, the 10 Capital AI chatbot. I'm here to make your journey through the startup ecosystem easier, faster, and a lot more fun. Need help finding your next big investment? Or maybe you're a founder looking for fundraising tips? I've got you covered. I pull all my knowledge from over 500 blogs, countless podcasts, and even some nifty calculators, like the How Fundable Is Your Startup tool, to give you the answers you need. So how do I work? Easy. You simply go to where I live on startupfundingespresso.com and look for me in the bottom right. As soon as I appear, go ahead and click on me to let me know you're here. And then there you go. All your questions answered at your fingertips. Whether you're into health tech, biotech, life sciences, or any of the other exciting fields out there, I'm equipped to help you navigate the trends, challenges, and opportunities in each one. Got a question? Just ask. And guess what? I even pull insights from the 10 Capital Network podcast on Investor Connect. It's packed with expert advice, success stories, and more, all designed to help you succeed in the venture capital world. So what are you waiting for? Let's chat. I'm here 24/7 to help you find the right answers, connect with great opportunities, and make the most out of your investments. See you on startupfundingespresso.com.
Great. So check that out, guys. When you get a chance, just go to that website, startupfundingespresso.com, and you can type in your prompt to get your answer.
And with that, let's begin our seminar.
So many of the programs, as you look through the options, have default vendors. You can use the default vendors, or you can select your own vendor and break out some of the money. In the case of the $50,000, you may want to use some for legal costs, some for regulatory, and some for commercialization. But you have to handle this in advance. If you don't, you lose your ability to control this and make it and have the money go to where you want it to go. This is all, there's not a lot you can do after things have been committed. Next slide. So I'm going to be covering TABA on an agency by agency basis. I'm starting with the NIH, and I'm going to spend more time on the NIH in the front because a lot of the things that are done in the NIH grant and TABA processes are going to be the same for the other organizations. Next. So TABA funding is part of their comprehensive program. They want to help you make better technical decisions. The main one is the fourth one is commercializing new products and processes, including intellectual property protections. Part of the things you can use your TABA money for is in the development of patents. Patents have value because patents can be sold, patents can be licensed, and that's part of a commercialization strategy. Next slide. This is a link to get more information. I put in this presentation, which is available after we're done, has links to the different agencies and their TABA discussions. Next. So this is consistent for all other programs, $6,500 per year for a phase one, up to $50K for phase two projects. Fast track is where you submit a phase one and phase two combined. And when you complete the requirements for the phase one, the phase two money is automatically released, and you can get TABA funding on both ends of it. They cannot be used for the phase three process, which is the commercialization readiness project. So $6,500, $50,000. You can request this under all these different programs. Next. You can use this for product sales, IP protection, regulatory plans. Regulatory plans you need to discuss with your program manager to make sure that you're doing the right things. Market research and doing the sales process. You cannot do it for going to conventions or events. That was a recent question that came up with one of my clients. Next. So you cannot do things like these audit services, bookkeeping. The patent costs, you can't use the TABA money for filing fees, but the filing fees are actually pretty small. That's $1,000 to $3,000. And so here's some of the breakdown of some of the things that are not part of the TABA program. One of the other advantages of doing in the TABA program is that you can assign the $50K to different options, and then you have an opportunity to move the money around later on in the TABA process. In the budget process. So if the regulatory costs go up, you can pull money from legal or commercialization to manage that. But the TABA budget is the initial stage, and then later on the executions where you have some options. But the patent expenses are for the patent application and defining what you're trying to patent. So
the question is, I thought patent expenses are unallowable. How can they be used for TABA?
But the patent expenses of developing the patent can be used. The actual the actual filing of the fees cannot be used, but you can work with your attorneys on developing your patent applications.
Good. Yeah. Shoba, thank you for the question. If anybody else has a question, please post it. Thanks, Earle. So patent prosecution is not allowable. Thanks. Okay.
Well, patent prosecution, the development of it, correct. And then so the actual the filing and the things beyond that are not. So yes. Requesting TABA funding in the application, if you want to use your own advisors, you have to put them into the application and the expense item. It's a pretty simple line item. Under direct expenses, it's added in and then it's subtracted when you're doing your totals. And you get a letter of support where the vendor will say, I will be supplying this many hours at this rate for this total amount. Jumping to the Department of Energy, another big one. The DOE is able to fund funding for phase one and phase two. There is a link there to getting into the details of the TABA program. Next. So you have, you can use services provided by the DOE selected provider for phase one, or have your own provider, but on phase two, you have to identify your own TABA provider, which can be the one the DOE selected for phase one or your own provider of services. National Science Foundation, the interesting opportunity with the NSF is that you can apply for a phase one, and NSF is pretty generous in supporting phase one science projects that look interesting, but when it comes to commercialization, they will usually pass on it and send you back to NIH or DOE. But the advantage is that by applying to the NSF phase one, you can get some feedback on your idea and whether the technology is of interest. Again, this is from the NSF website. on what and they're looking at the commercialization. TABA funding is phase 2 only, not for phase 1. That's an important difference between the NSF and the other programs. So there's the 50K available in the phase 2, but they are fairly generous in making things happen on the phase 1 without the TABA funding. And here is the links to the NSF TABA and innovations information. USDA, the USDA has TABA funding as well. They have a default vendor they can use for. They may not be used for research and development grants that are otherwise supported by grant funding, but there is USDA TABA, and there's information on the USDA program. So the bottom line is, don't lose your nerve. You have to go out and make this happen. You've got a fairly short window of opportunity from when the topics are announced. You need to aggressively move into the process, and you have to be prepared before the things are announced. So if you look through the topic options, you know that they're going to have similar topics the next go round, and you can prepare accordingly. This is a matter of not losing your nerve. The description here is a chessboard my daughter sent me once, which was, this is a real board, in that the white knight advanced and then retreated, and you can't do that. And now I'm open for questions.
Great. Please post your questions in the chat box. Earle, my first question is about SBIR grants. What % are actually successful on the first round?
The SBIR folks publish that, usually anywhere from 20 to 25%. If you get rid of the junky ones, that increases your odds. The important thing is that when you're doing your applications, you want to make sure that you are doing a good job of it. If you do a good job of it, you'll get feedback, and the feedback will help you if you need to reapply. The good news is they'll give you feedback and say, please fix these 4 things. The bad news is when it gets reviewed the next time around, it's a different group of people. So what they told you to fix may not matter. But that's the excitement of it all. But usually 20% is a good round number. I think when you talk to Anna has programs that increase their odds of getting success, and I think she'll speak to that. And if you want to jump in here real quick on that point.
Yes. So there's several things we look at when we want to talk about success. I'll show you a few. First is, as Earle said, your project and your team are number one. This is the most important, what you're going to do and who are the person that are competent to do it. But then there's several things. So for example, there's waiver topics that are special areas of interest. So if you looked at my LinkedIn, you see, for example, that I'm promoting a lot of women's health. So that's a topic that right now, if you have a women's health project, your likelihood of winning the grant, if you have a good plan, it's very high because there's a lot of interest. Aging is another one, addiction is another one. So there's things that they want to see more represented, and they want to fund more year to year. And those things have been posted. So we keep track of those, for example. Yeah, so there's first your project, but then there's things that you can do to kind of increase the likelihood of success.
And my question is, what's the number one reason why people don't get accepted? Earle, what do you think is the number one reason that prevents people from achieving application success?
Well, I'm on a couple of different review panels, and on the phase 2s, it's having a crappy commercialization plan, to be honest. The people who don't understand that you have to devote part of the resources to developing the plan, how to sell it, and putting someone who is in charge of managing that process for the sales program. That's probably one of the key ones. The second area, and you will get pushed back on this early on, are the aims, where you're saying scientifically we're going to fix these things, and this is the plan. And the good news is they will push back on you in the very beginning before you do your application, but the aims are going to be key. But on the phase 2, the pushback is on having a good commercialization plan.
And so they say good commercialization plan. Are we talking about investment in dollars, finding good sales channels, and solid marketing plans, or what are they looking for?
We're talking about the whole idea of, this is the product that we're defining. This is how we're going to sell it. These are the customers we're looking at. And also, if you're looking at venture capital on the back end, bringing in someone like you, where you actually have someone who knows what they're talking about. a lot of these companies will sit there and say, well, the CEO is going to tap into their personal network, or we know a lot of people already. That's a killer. And so you really want to be able to say, I've got someone who is going to help us define the product. It's going to be software as a service. This is how we're going to sell it. He's some of our targeted customer clients, and this is how we're going to proceed. And this is how we're going to create the revenue. And creating the revenue is where you'll say, I expect to sell this many in year one, and then in year two, I will have this many more new customers, plus I will go back to my customers from year one and expand with them. Things like that. You really have to define the different steps and then make sure you have someone who is dedicated to doing this.
What's the impact on success if you have a minimum viable product? You actually built something and showed it to customers. What does that do for the success rate?
It helps, but you have to have someone who's doing that. There's a lot of places where you can become the OEM, like getting involved with Thermo Fisher and getting into their catalog, but that doesn't turn into sales. Just, being listed in the catalog is one thing, turning it into sales and having someone pound on the doors and saying, look, you can buy this from Thermo Fisher. If you're selling into the medical network, you want to tap into the different hospital buying groups, and find some way of being part of that. So you can say to the hospital, if you buy this, here's where you buy it from, that sort of thing. So that's key in that part of it.
What about anchor clients where you actually built a custom version for a set of customers? How does that help you or hurt you?
Well, if you're defining the customers and you're talking about how you're going to be dealing with the customization and what kind of changes they want, that becomes part of your sales model, where you can say the basic unit is going to cost X, and then there's this much consulting. There's also going to be the ongoing maintenance. You can have price increases of software year to year, but you're going to take them through the process of how do you keep them as a customer for 5 years. You'll also look at the budget process, and you'll realize that for a lot of these organizations, you do not want to go knocking on their door 1 year after 1 year after 1 year, because that's a good way of losing the business. But if you sit there and sell them a 5-year contract, with all these different options added onto there, that's where you find success. If you're selling hardware, you have to have a program that says we're going to be selling the hardware, and this is what happens when the hardware breaks. So you have all these different things to do it, but you want to have a long-term contract when you're signing this, so that you don't get kicked out the door and have someone say, well, we're not really using it.
What about sales channel? Does it help to have a direct sales force hired to sell it, or does that not make a difference?
It does make a difference, and you want to find the people who are part of this. Manufacturing reps are one area. There's also a lot of different variations of that, and getting those folks involved, and making them part of the sales, because if they can walk in the door, and already know the people that you need to know, that makes the whole process a lot faster.
Right. Everyone's talking about having a budget for the project, and you want to make sure the budget includes everything. If you set the number low, you may not be able to get the full amount of the grant. How does that work?
Yeah, so when you set it low,
Anna?
Go ahead, Anna.
yeah, so when you set the budget lower than what's expected, it kind of comes off as you don't know what you're doing. So you're asking for less money, thinking he will give you a leg up. That's usually what we see. And then actually it can impact your proposal, because you're not asking for the full thing. So you always should ask for a little bit more than what's allowed. So yeah, they can say, hey, we are not going to give you that much, but you should always try to go a bit above. Not too much, but a little bit, yes.
Well,
So if I apply for $1 million grant, I should ask for more than $1 million, and they might give it to me?
Yeah.
How much more can I ask before they say, no, that's too much?
but if you're looking at
Depends on the center.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it really depends on the center, how much money they have, and your grant itself. But yeah, they usually, if it's not too much, they will give it to you. So I've seen 15 grand more, 20 more. It's fine.
Okay, I have a question from the audience. How critical is it to have publications or number of years of experience for these awards for an innovative idea for NSF SBIR awards?
Well, this is going to be part of your bio sketches, where you're listing the experience and the things that you've done. So the more you've done, the better it is. and the more expertise. This also ties into if you have a small company, it's a good idea to look at adding in a university partner and bringing in their experience and their publications, et cetera, into your process. That helps with the research. It also helps with the certification of the work that's being done. And that's an effective strategy for a lot of these startups. Jumping back to the previous question, if they're telling you that there's $2 million on the table, you should spend $2 million and make sure you do everything thoroughly. There is no reward for coming in at 1.2 and leaving $800,000 there and leaving things incomplete.
Great. Any other questions from the audience? Let's see. We have just 3 more minutes, and then we'll switch over to the next one. I guess my last. Oh, here he is. Okay, thank you for your suggestion. Okay, great. Any other questions from the audience?
Anna, you might want to throw in something on the bio sketches and how to find.
How critical is the number of publications and years of experience? Yes, so the most important thing is your project, but then having a PhD or an MD, so for example, for the biotech side, it will give you that credibility. So if you have somebody who has publications on the area and has done work on that and can show the documentation for it, it will make your proposal much stronger. So for NIH proposals, we also have to add the biosketch for all key personnel. So then in the biosketch, we'll tell them the track record of the person, what they have done, why are they qualified to do this study. So that's really important. So if you have, so also the recommendation letters are really important. Having recommendation letters usually from professors as well that are specialists in the area, or subject matter experts, could also be business experts. Those are things that can really help your proposal, because you really want to show that your team has the expertise to carry out the project, and they have a track record of that, both in the scientific and the business side. And then if the team doesn't have the expertise, really you can have the best project in the world that you're not going to be awarded. That's kind of the truth about it, because you need, so these are federal grants, so you need the trust of the committee. So they need to trust you. So if you don't have any, if you have articles, that's great. If they're in completely different areas, it's still good to have, but it's not as impactful.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Last chance for questions for Earle. If you have them, go and put them in. After that, let's move to Anna's presentation. And if you want to launch your slides and get ready for that.
Yeah, I'll share my slides. Okay, so basically the purpose of this presentation is to give you a window on a few things that go into winning a phase 2 SBIR. So SBIRs are divided in 2 main phases. Phase 1, where you're going to do the feasibility studies, proof of concept. So you have an idea, maybe you were doing research in academia, and now you have a great idea of a product that can be spearheaded out of academia, and you want to start researching it. So phase 1s are $300,000, maximum a year, and they are to test, R&D, that's it. But phase 2s, this presentation is focused on phase 2s. They're totally different. So I'm going to show you a few things, because if you talk with people who do grants, especially grant consultants, most people will tell you that the writing is really important, your project is really important, but the strategy behind, there's a lot of things you can do to really make sure that you have the best likelihood of success. So this is just a little snippet of some of those things. So phase 2s are the type of grants that you apply to when you already did your R&D and you want to move towards commercialization. They are typically, and I'm talking about NIH. So basically the purpose of phase 2 is to bring your product that you already did R&D on towards commercialization. Phase 2s are typically $2 million and can go up to 3 years. If you just need 2 years, that's totally fine. Most typically, people spend $2 million in 2 years. And what you need is to be a for-profit business. These are not for universities, they are for businesses. You need to be US based and have less than 500 employees. So a small business is defined as less than 500 employees. And at least 50% of your company needs to be owned or controlled by a US citizen or a permanent resident. That means somebody who has a green card. And typically for phase 2, you need to have completed the phase 1. So you apply for phase 1, do R&D, and then with the same product, you apply for the phase 2. There is also another type of application called the direct to phase 2. So this happens when you have a company, you did the research on your own, and then you want to commercialize your product. So you already have the equivalent of a phase 1 done on your own through investments, your own capital, whatever it is, and you apply directly for the phase 2 without going through the phase 1. So in that case, here is distinguishing both. We already talked about most of them. In that case, you apply directly for phase 2 without having won a phase 1 before. So if you do that, you have to show that you have completed the equivalent of a phase 1, which is $300,000, more or less. You might have more, which is great. The more preliminary data you have, the stronger your proposal will be. And the equivalent research to a year of research. Then I wanted to kind of show you the global panorama. So when I onboard a client and they want to work with us, we already saw that they have a great project and a great team. They ask me, okay, so what's my likelihood of success? So I did this graph that shows the last 10 years of SBIR Phase II applications, just a regular Phase II, and the direct to Phase II. So regular Phase IIs have more or less a 40% success rate over the years. That has decreased a little bit over the past years. But when you look at direct to Phase II, the rate is around the 20%. So they have a lower success rate. And in 2018, they didn't even award any of those, any direct phase 2. You had to go through phase 1 to get phase 2. I also added this dotted line in blue. So if you do the commercialization path for 2 years and you get awarded the $2 million, you get to the end and there's still something missing. So you need more investors or you need a little bit more to carry out the commercialization. You can apply for a phase 2B, which is also called bridge. And the phase 2B gives you additional money, and it's also around 40% success rate. If you look at the bottom graph, I added the number of applicants. So if you look at the black line here, you can see that the regular phase 2 has been having around 500 applicants. And there's less applicants typically for direct to phase 2, so people who didn't get a phase 1 before. But in the past 4 years, there's actually many more applicants, around 750 a year, for direct to phase 2 than for phase 1, than for regular phase 2. So this means that a lot of companies are actually making the first feasibility studies on their own, and then they are applying for NIH when they already have that part narrowed down and they're really interested in the commercialization. I also like to mention that in the first graph, direct phase 2, regular phase 2 has a better likelihood of success because there's already a relationship built. So these people already got one grant and they're just continuing the work. So it's much easier to get it than just somebody out of the blue applying. Technically, that's not always the truth. If you look at the states, so here is the likelihood of success, the success rate by state. And for example, if you look at California, you'll see that the success rate over there for regular phase 2 is around 33%. And here in Texas is 36%. So you might think, well, I have a better likelihood of success if I apply from Texas. And if you look at Kansas, it's 50%. So you say, 50%, maybe if I apply from Kansas, I have a better likelihood of success. So if you look actually at where the money is going, you will see that from the 134 million attributed to phase 2 SBIRs in the last year, 2023, most of that money, 29 million, went to California. And then if you look at Kansas, that's much less. Then you have also Virginia, North Carolina, and New York, who are really strong, get a lot of money from the SBIR program. And if you look into the direct to phase 2, the landscape in the country also changes. So in this case, if you look at California, 22%, it's really low, and Texas, 13% of success, it's really low. And then if you look at our neighbors, New Mexico, it's 100%. So there were 2 applicants over there, I believe, and the both got it. So this doesn't mean, so this is not the only factor affecting it, but there's a lot. So one question I get a lot from my clients is, if I was to open my company right now, where is there any advantage if I do it in Texas, or if I do it in California, or if I do it somewhere else? And they usually think that the strongest places like California, New York, that have more research will be stronger because you have a bigger support system, there are more incubators there. And that's not true. So for example, if it was my company, I would probably open it in one of these other states that don't have as many applicants. And I would open it in a state like Kentucky, for example, because Kentucky matches your value. So if you win a SBIR phase 1 for 300, I think up to $500,000, if you win a phase 1 for 300,000, they will give you 300,000 more for getting the grant there and bringing research to their state. So, you know, there's more considerations that you can have, and you can look at this data for a specific state and see what's going on. So for direct to phase 2, curiously, there's actually more funding available than for direct to phase 1 than for regular phase 2.
We have a question from the audience. Which states have a matching system for the grants?
Oh, there's a list. If you look at NIH SBIR matching, or you can contact me afterwards and I'll send you the exact one, but there's many states who have matching. And there is also one of the reasons why I'm mentioning this is that the NIH does look at this data, and this is taken, the graphs were made using their data. They look at it every year, and then they have programs like the FAST program, which tries to help small businesses from states that are historically underrepresented in the SBIR program and help them apply. So there's resources also in these states. And there's even grant writing services that they offer for free or at a reduced price just because you are on those states. So when you think about applying, those are things you can, when you are a small company and you need the money, those things can really help you spearhead your project and get a better likelihood of success. Okay. Another of the questions I get all the time is, okay, I'm going to apply for $2 million, but what can I spend the money on? What are my limitations? So one of the thing I see people spending most of the money on is salaries. You can pay your team, but nobody can make more than $221,000 a year. That's the max cap for NIH. But you can, apart from the salary, pay fringe benefits up to 25%. You can buy equipment, materials. You are also entitled to 40% of indirect costs. So this 40% of your direct costs is whatever you need to run your companies, to keep the lights on. So internet, cleaning services, rent, whatever you need are included on those 40% is the overhead. And since this is a grant for businesses that are for profit, you are also entitled to a 7% profit. So 7% of profit and 40% of indirect costs, you don't have to negotiate. Let's assume that you are going to need it to run your company. And that's already done. If you need more, you need to negotiate it. Oh, we have another question.
Yeah, are there limitations for salary? For example, academics who still have their job at a university and also in leadership of the company.
Yes, so you need to adapt your salary. So your salary under the grant can't be more than 220. And if you're the PI, the grant that when you get awarded, that will have to be your main employer.
Great.
Yeah. In other question I get a lot is about foreign involvement. Foreign involvement, you can't do research outside of the United States on federal NIH SBIR money. But when they say case by cases, the only case I see that's acceptable is if you're building, for example, a medical device and you need a certain type of equipment or a piece that's not manufactured here. In that case, you can buy it from abroad, but everything else should be minimized. Like hiring consultants from abroad, it's not accepted, and that is enough to be disqualified. You can use the money to travel, consultant to subcontractors, you can use it for your regulatory path. Typically, I see a lot of the subcontractors being clinical trial organizations and manufacturers. And you can also ask for the extra $50,000 for TABA, as Earle said. All of our clients work with Earle to get that extra. And
there's a comment in the audience. FAST is not for underrepresented states, but underrepresented groups and demographics. Is that correct?
There's another one. So there's both.
Oh, there's two FASTs?
Yeah, they help both things. So you can use
they do
it
both.
for,
I see.
yeah.
Okay. Good comment. Next.
So another question I get a lot is, okay, we have a medical device or a pharma product. Do we need to get the FDA approval before we apply for the grant? No, you don't, but you have to have everything figured out. As Earle said, you need to know what you need to do to get the approval. So you need to plan, and you need to have some strategies helping you design that path. So here is the typical path. If you have, this is just an example. So typically you make an in vitro research, then you do the in vivo, usually in animals, pharmacokinetics, the toxicity study. So that's typically phase 1. And then when you go to phase 2, it's already number 3. You're on the preclinical development, clinical trials, new drugs. So typically they want to see that the in vivo research, at least part of it, was done for embarking on the phase 2. About ourselves, so we are a consultancy company. We apply for grants. So in my case, life sciences and AI, because that's my expertise. And we have another department that does clean tech, aerospace, energy, anything that's fuel, anything related to engineering, they handle it. And we do everything from management, strategy, so helping you frame the project. We have grant writers that write application. We also facilitate your relationship with NIH if you need to ask questions or you need clarification. Help you secure letters for the commercialization plan and to make it stronger. And we have a submissions team that does the submission for you. Then we typically onboard people either on a project or multiple projects. But once you make, imagine you are onboarded on a single project, we apply, and if for some reason you get rejected, we will pick up that proposal and then reapply for all the grants in our portfolio that you are eligible for. So up to 4 grants. So we'll just pick up what you gave us and reapply. So that really increases your chances for success. And we also reapply for the same grant. I think there's a question.
We have a couple of questions. First is, would we get the slide decks or recording later? Certainly we'll send out the recording and you can contact these people to get their deck if you like. And then the next one is, could you share a ballpark figure for your fees and model?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Please send me an email. So in the next slide, I have my contact. So let's see, next one.
If you
Well,
want to
let's
put
see
your
now.
phone and email into the
Yeah,
chat
this is my
box, they can
phone.
reply back to that and you can pick up that discussion when we get to the next stage here. We do have another question in the QA box. How much do you charge for each grant? We'll give you the contact details and you guys can follow up just as soon as we put them in the chat box and go from there. Before we leave this topic, we do have just a few more minutes and just want to see if anybody else has a question as well beyond these things. And if you could put yours in there. And
Yeah, putting my
another
contact
one
in
over
the chat.
here. And then in the Q&A, there is a email to go back to Tapan Khan, who asked the question to begin with. So we'll leave him there in the Q&A for you to follow up. Alexina Exposita, if you have a question, please put it in the chat box. I see your hand is raised. If you could put that in the chat box, I'll be glad to pick that up and answer it. And we also have Anna and Earle's email there. Shoot them an email as we're talking, and I'm sure they'll get back to you here in a moment. And in your experience, what's the number one reason why people don't raise funding through the process that you see there?
The number one reason is the project is not well narrowed down. So many times I see people that have really good ideas and really good products, but they didn't think through what they want to do. So you need to have your plan as to be really well narrowed down. So what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how you're going to measure success, how your team, so you need to tie your team to the science and to the business. So it's usually, so for the science part, you need to have specialists that know that, but then you need somebody with a track record on the business side of raising money, directing other companies that can show that you have somebody who can bring it to market. So if one of the legs is missing, you're not like what Earle said, that many times people fail in the commercialization plan. The reason for that is that typically people who get phase one, they are scientists with good technology and they develop the R&D, but then when they get to phase two, they are really good on the science, but then the commercialization is not as good. And you still might get it in those cases, but if there's two grants that are really strong on the scientific side, but then the commercialization in one is good and the other one is really not good, that will make the difference. That will be the thing that will break the tie. And yeah, so that's also another reason why so many people call us, because we kind of look at all of it. So we have commercialization experts, we have NIH reviewers, we have, and we've done so many grants already that we kind of pinpoint what your weak points are. We send you a list literally of the things you need to strengthen to get awarded.
Great. What if the topic you as scientist wants to pursue is not on the topic list of the SBIR grants? Is there anything you can do about that?
Yes, you try to choose the center that has the topic closest to what you want to apply for. So basically the description is that there has to be an unmet medical need. So if it's not medical and it's not saving lives or it's not helping patients in some way, that's probably not a good fit. But if it is and it's remotely close, we will talk to the program officer and let them know we have this project. We know it's not one of the topics, but what do you think? And then they will let you know. If it's totally out, and they will tell you, we don't think this is a good fit.
Great. Are there any other questions from the audience before we move to the next presentation? If so, go and post it now. Otherwise, we'll move to the next presentation at this point. Okay. Anna, thank you so much. I'll share my slides and we'll kick off from there. Let's see. For those in the audience, my name is Hall Martin. I'm with 10 Capital, and today we're going to talk about raising funding for your startup. Once you go through the SBIR process and you raise a grant funding, that's a good opportunity to use that to help you raise additional funding from outside the government. Grants are one and done. They're non-dilutive. That's great. They don't take any equity off the table. But what I find grants most helpful for is they give validation to your startup. Government thinks you're worth a $1 million grant. That must mean there's value there, certainly in the technology. And that's a great story to tell to outside investors. Typically, we're going to angels first and then beyond. But here, let's talk about what it takes to raise funding for your startup. So the first question I always get is people wanting to raise $1 million and they're thinking I'm going to raise it in 30 days, 45, 50 at the most. And I have to tell people that for every $1 million you're going to raise, it will take you 1 calendar year to raise it. And what they're not taking into account is all the work that goes in and around the fundraise, not just pitching, but all of the document preparation, the diligence, and the other things that we'll outline in this presentation. So even if your fundraiser isn't that large, it can still take several months to plan out and execute to the fundraise, even from angel investors who typically don't have a very deep diligence process. So here's a rough outline of what you should be considering. So the first one is you need to check your readiness. Are you ready to raise funding? Ideally, you have a product and some units sold. Now, if you're a pre-revenue company, what you really want is an MVP, a minimum viable product. You built something and showed that it can work on a lab bench or in a customer lab itself. You want to show that you can build it and it can do something meaningful. It does not have to be much. The purpose of an MVP is not to wow the customer to get a check. It's to start the dialogue with the customer to get meaningful feedback. And if you have enough to get meaningful feedback, that's enough to go out with. And so that's what you want to consider. Next is you've got a core team. There's two, at heart of it, there's somebody building this and there's somebody selling this. You have that figured out. They're in place working, and we're looking for a third and fourth to join us. You need something to show that we are thinking about selling this as addition to making it. And third, you want to check with your attorney. You want to make sure that you're getting your documents set up correctly for the legal entity, for your patents, for your employment contracts, for your IP assignments. There's a fair number of deals that need to go together, and it's important to have that. Next, you want to prepare the company for your fundraise. And here you want to put your core documents together. For pitching investors, you need an executive summary, 1-pager, a pitch deck, 12, 15 slides, 5-year financials, and then income statement, balance sheet, and then some due diligence documents such as cap table and other key documents that go into it. So having all those in one place up front makes it easy down the way. In many cases, this is a gathering process, just pulling all that paperwork together. So over a period of time, if you work on it every day, you'll get it done. Second, you want to put together a board of advisors. Go look for people that can help you with the business. These are not paid or compensated positions, but people that know the space, they know the application, they know startups, and they can give you some advice on how you pull this thing together. And having that will help you raise funding as well. And third, you need to put together a list of potential investors. You start with people you know and write out a list, and then they will know people that you can add to the list as well. And so you need to have an initial set. One of the best techniques I ever saw was the person who came to me saying, I'm not raising money now, but in 6 months I will be. Can I keep you informed of my progress? And every month I got an email from them, short paragraph of what they were doing and how they were doing it. And at the end of 6 months, I knew quite a bit about the project even before he ever asked for the first check. And that is a great way of preparing your investors for writing a check. Most people come in, give a pitch, and then they ask for a check right there. Well, they've had all of 15 minutes to digest this. It's much better if you have 6 months to digest this to get a check from an investor. Next is you want to prepare the investors as well. This is months 3 to 5 that you're in now to do this. You've gone out and you've found the people, you pitched some of them, and you're now talking with these guys. And what you want to do in this case is start with 10 investors you already know and have made contact with, and then every month pitch 10 more investors. You want to start with people you know very well to practice your pitch and see what questions they have. As they ask questions, you update the deck so you figure out what they get and what they don't get. After about 30 or 40, you're going to know very well how to manage the investor process because you know what triggers them to learn, what questions they have, and you've got most of that baked into the deck. So it should be seamless at that point. Then after you pitch them, next month you want to send them an update. This is one very short email, just a few bullet points explaining what progress you're making. And you want to focus on the core 4 topics of sales, team, product, and fundraise. And what you're trying to do there is show the traction that you're making. At this point, investors care about only one thing. What are you doing? They're not concerned about the size of the market or what a competitor did. They really want to just see what traction or activity you're getting in this deal. In month 6 to 9, we want to follow up with each investor and try and close them. And you want to walk them through the process. Along the way, and the key here with investors is that you have to build a little bit of a relationship. This is not purely a financial transaction. This is going to be a deal that someone's going to be in for 5, 7, 10 years or more. So they really want to know who you are, and they really want to know that you've got what it takes to make this successful. And at heart, they want to be a little bit a part of it. They want to, stay in touch and understand how it moves forward. So make sure you're setting up your communications to do that as well. Next is you want to continue to follow up with the investors, to contact them, to close them, again, giving updates, but also building that relationships. And along the way, you want to start educating them about your marketplace and about where the business is and what's going on. And then you start moving into the place where you can actually start asking for their help. If you have investors that have actually signed up, you should do a monthly update to them and tell them more about it. And you ask for their feedback on who you should hire, where you should get another customer, how you should close another investor. And on a point-by-point basis, investors will help you with that. And so that's the next step with it, is start to go and have the investors help you with what you're doing. Next is you want to close these investors and try to get them to come in. At this point, investors will ask for your due diligence documents. And so you want to make that available. And due diligence typically has all your basic documents like legal entity filings, articles of incorporation, patent filings, et cetera. And you should start building your due diligence box or data room from the very start and add to it as you go along. And for those who are serious investors, and I always know if they're serious by asking them the question, well, how much are you thinking about investing? If they're not quite sure, then they're not quite there yet. When they get to a number, I'm in for 100K. Okay, great. Now you're serious. Let's send you the box. If you have truly confidential information, you can actually use the due diligence box process. One box has got all the general information. It's got everything. A lot of it's publicly available. That box goes to anybody who asks. The second box has confidential client information, other things like trade secrets, and that goes to those who are signing an NDA. So you always want to be a place to hand out the box, because 25, 50K check angels don't need to sign NDAs. They just are going to glance at this stuff anyway. But for others that might have access to potential competitors and so forth, you want NDAs in place for that part of the process. Next one is finishing the round. Usually by now you're in month 11 or 12 and you're now closing out. You've got most of the money you need. If you got more than you wanted, you can oversubscribe the round. That's fine. You can start to figure out how to close this out. And what you want to do is start looking at building the relationship with the investors so that you keep the dialogue going with them, because you may need them in the second round. So often the case, investors are taking their allocation, the 100K, and they're cutting it in half and giving you 50K now. And in 6 to 12 months, if things are going well, they'll give you the other 50K. So you want to stay in touch with these guys in case they're in that mode of being able to follow on support with you're doing. And then you want to keep sending updates and meeting with the investors to get their feedback. The other thing I found is if you're in a recurring revenue business, you really don't need all this money in one go. If you got money at a little bit at a time, that's enough to keep the business running. That's the beauty of convertible notes and safe notes, is that typically the money's coming in every month, and they sign the check, you sign the note, the money goes into the business the next day, so it's a rolling close. So that can be very helpful in keeping the ball rolling as you go forward. And in some companies, the fundraise is never closed. It's always open. There's always another convertible note available. And we keep doing this until we get a price round, and then we can put that money converts into all the convertible notes convert into that new price round. So you want to keep the ball rolling even after you finish, just for when somebody may be interested in joining. And finally, we'll talk about, setting this up, fundraisers. You want to set up some systems, get a CRM put together, get the contacts in there, get some email templates, get some funnels going, and don't just use Excel and email. Try to get a better process going behind you, maybe get a little bit of an admin team to help with the administrative piece of it, and then keep the updates going out to the investors.
most of the process, if not all of it, takes place online. Last is there'll be questions here. So if anybody has a question, put it in the chat box. The thing I'll close with that I find with most companies raising SBIRs is that if you can take some of the SBIR money and build a prototype out of it or an MVP, that will work great. That really convinces angel investors that you raised some money from the government and you built something with it. I often find people at this stage take the money and they go write another white paper, or they go do another experiment, or they go do another feature research. But what really impresses the investor is I actually built something that someone can use or test or work with. And that's what I would do with the money, is look very hard at being able to build something with it. Because another white paper is not going to convince an investor. An MVP will convince an investor. The other thing you want to look at is looking for anchor clients. These are customers that you're talking to in your customer discovery, and they're telling you what they want, but they want maybe a custom version of that. And you can go back to them and sell them a customized version of what they want. And they're putting in money so you can build it. And at the end of that, you've got the designs and the technology and the instructions on how to build a standard product at a much lower price, because you use customer money to help you build a custom version of it. And so you might want to think about along the lines of anchor clients who can help you get up and running. So with that, let me go and see if there's any questions from your side, guys. Okay, I think we answered these here in this box here.
I do have a question. So when you are initially identifying your board members, so you mentioned that they don't have to be paid for the service, but and we can contact them online, but is there anything, so is it advantageous that the board members are somebody from our general area, like subject matter experts, or do we really need somebody who works, for example, at the venture capital or has experience raising funds? And also in that line, how is there anything we need to use? So if we want to onboard somebody as a board member, they have to spend their time. So are there strategies to kind of attract key people to be board members? Is there anything we can offer them, or what usually attracts good board members?
So in your first fundraise, like a pre-seed raise, typically there's no board of directors. It's still too early for that. Formal board of directors are often voted in at the Series A level, where you're actually raising a substantial amount of money, $3-5 million, and we have to put in outside oversight for the company. And typically it's 5 members. There's 2 from the company, 2 from the investors, and 1 that has industry knowledge or domain knowledge, as you mentioned. And so you have a composition like that comes up. For the initial raises from angels and angel groups in the earlier stage, is probably not necessary to have a formal board of directors. What you want is an informal board of advisors. These are people that, to your point, can help you. They have a network of investors they can help bring in. They have a network of ex-CEOs who can come in and be add to the team that you want to build, because you need good, solid people up front. And they also want people that know something about the industry domain. And the way you keep the costs low here is not compensate them, is you just take them to lunch. We're going to have a lunch 3 times a month. And if you can make the first one, it's going to be in this restaurant. Second one would be this one. And you get 2 or 3 guys around the table for lunch, and you just tell them what you're working on, how it's going. And for the price of a lunch, you get their expertise coming out, and it's part of their day, so they don't have to spend too much time outside of work for it. So the lunch thing or the breakfast thing works very well for informal board of advisors. When it's time for the institutional raise and you're doing a Series A, you often put in the board of directors formal, and you also put in an options pool for the employees. And a lot of things happen at the Series A. But for most of these people that are raising grants, they're really not at Series A. They're at pre-seed and seed plus. And that's probably not necessary to have a formal board. There's just not. You'll find if you have a board, you'll be spending a day putting the reports together, a day giving it, and a day recovering from it. And 3 days out of your schedule every quarter is a lot for a startup. You really don't. You have a big company, you need that. But if you're a small startup, you probably don't need that kind of a spend on it, so to speak. So that's one way to think about boards and how you might go about it.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
Cool. Any other questions from the audience about fundraisers or MVPs? I think we have another question here. Let's see. Okay, so I will share my presentation. I will pull this off of the mailer here, and I will use that, and I will put in my in the chat box my email. And so anybody else that wants to get the slides, just email me here, and I'll be glad to email you back the slides directly, and everybody on the registration will get the actual recording that we have here today. So we'll do that, and we did that there. And then, are there any other questions at this point? We can move to breakout rooms here pretty soon. We'll see if we're ready for that. Earle, did you have any other questions?
No, if you want to move to a breakout room or email me separately that to get a copy of the slides or do a follow-up conversation, be happy to chat.
Okay. Great. Yeah, like I say, we'll have breakout rooms here in a few minutes when we open it back up. I will say there are three reasons why people often don't raise funding as we get ready for breakout rooms. Number one is they have this outsized valuation. I just think we're worth $50 million with no revenue, but I can't really explain why. At heart, you have to have a valuation that's in the range with everybody else, the market, and you need to know something about the market in order to set that. And to say we're going to keep all this equity for ourselves without paying anybody anything for it is really not a realistic expectation. You will give up 20-25% on each round in the early days of fundraising, which is why you want to use as much grant funding as you can. You want to be as capital efficient as you can, because raising rounds of funding is dilutive on your ownership for sure. The second reason is there's something wrong in the business. We have lawsuits on the books. We have key, missing documents in the data room, and we can't explain why they're not there, or don't want to explain why they're not there. So we have to make sure that the business is truly ready for fundraising. It's got a clean cap table, it's got a clean financial sheet, and everything is what we say it is in this case. And the third reason is that people don't raise funding is they don't follow up. You'll go out and pitch to the investor. You'll have a great meeting, and then the investor never hears back. I mean, they don't get any updates. They don't hear back from you. And then 2 months later, you wonder why there's no check. Well, did you go back? And I'm a big believer that it takes 7 touches to close a sale. So it takes 7 touches to close an investor. So you need to be having that level of follow-up in order to get the check. It will not be one and done. In this Zoom world, what you'll find is it's very easy to open the dialogue online, but my experience in raising funding for the last 15 years in this model is that it's very hard to close an investor online. You can get a 25K check here or there, but if you're doing anything more, you have to go back in person to meet with them. Like I say, you have to build a little bit of a relationship. In that process, you have to go back and start to answer their questions. They want to get to know you. They're peeling back layers on the onion every time they meet to figure out what this is. And so that's why we want to do that, is to make sure that they know the investor and the investor knows them. And so this is a part of the process, is building that relationship. And it does take in-person follow-up. When you have investor interested, email is great for communication, but it's terrible for building a relationship. You need to move to phone calls. You need to move to in-person meetings in order to get the check. So that's one thing to consider, is that Zoom is nice for the start, but it's not going to carry you all the way to the end. With that, let's go back and see, are we ready for breakout rooms? So with that, I want to thank Earle Hager and Anna for their great presentation today. I want to thank you guys in the audience for great questions as well. And with that, let's go ahead and move to breakout rooms unless there's any other question or comment. Anna, Earle, any final words from your side? They may have already moved to the breakout room. So with that, let's go and join the breakout rooms and go forward from there. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll send you the recording. I hope to see you next time. So with that, I want to thank Earle Hager and Anna for their great presentation today. I want to thank you guys in the audience for great questions as well. And with that, let's go and move to breakout rooms unless there's any other question or comment. Anna, Earle, any final words from your side? They may have already moved to the breakout room. So with that, let's go and join the breakout rooms and go forward from there. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll send you the recording. I hope to see you next time.